coming up to 6 years now. So it's been an exciting time. I love the industry. I love the product suite. And my goal here is to give you a little bit of information, enough for you to be dangerous, a little bit of information about the product, and more importantly, what to look for when you're prospecting. So we're going to look at what the market opportunity is for you or advisors in general, who the ideal client is and how you can recognize that individual, how the IPP works, and what are one of our secret weapons, the intergenerational transfer. And then we've got a couple of case studies to have a look at. So with that being said, we are off, and we're going to take questions at the end. So I'm happy to answer them when the time comes. So what is the market opportunity? So the individual pension plan is a solution that you might have read about when you were studying for your LLQP or your CFP. Not a lot of information is provided in study material, so we're not expecting you to really understand or embrace it at this point. Really, it's a matter of sort of creating an opportunity, put the light bulb on. What I'd love you to leave today's session with is knowing how this might fit into your business as a new sales tool. And then maybe there might be 2 or 3 individuals that are going to come to mind. And so don't worry, you don't need to memorize or know the content of this. That's my responsibility, but we are going to get into a little bit in depth within the product in order to satisfy the requirement for CE credits. Also, just on that note of CE credits, I'll be sending them out in the next 2 to 3 weeks. And if you have already claimed a CE credit for this course, then best not to claim it twice. I believe that there's a 2-year waiting period before you can use the credit again for the same content. Anyway, that's all for you to discuss or figure out, and here we are. So what is the market opportunity? Well, you might think that the market opportunity is really, based upon the competitor landscape. Well, not so much in the individual pension plan, because a lot of advisors aren't aware of it. What it does stand alone on its own as being a unique opportunity for you to fill a gap in the space of your prospects. However, what I've gone through the Canadian Federation of Independent Business report, which they published in 2023. So this is the most current stats that they have. And this struck me as being really interesting. So of our business owners in Canada, 46% do not have a succession plan. What we're wanting to address is the retirement plan for the individual and the retirement plan for the business. And so we see here, this is a huge opportunity for you to step into that marketplace. And yes, they say 45% have an informal plan. Well, this is where you can provide great service to the prospects, is to say, well, let's talk about what that informal plan looks like. What is the strategy? And honestly, in their previous report, the CFIB's report, which I think was maybe 2015 was the last report that they had done, it was 90% of business owners were relying on selling the business to fund their retirement. So that question to say, what is your informal plan? Let's talk about what that looks like. And then how do we put some concrete measures and a strategy in place so you can become a valuable resource in succession planning for the individual as well as for the business. Another really surprising stat, 4 in 10 Canadians have less than $5,000 in savings, and almost a quarter have no savings at all. Again, this was a survey that went out to business owners within Canada. So a very, very surprising stat, again, showing the opportunity for you to step in as being that go-to retirement resource. And lastly, 1 in 4 Canadians who are currently working are projecting and looking forward to what their retirement is going to look like. And 26% are actually thinking that they're going to have to return to work to support themselves financially. So very um, enlightening stats for you to be able to have some really open-ended, concrete discussions with your prospects. So you could even just use this as a door opener and say, did you know, like 1 in 4 plan or think that they're going to have to return to work in their retirement. And I know that you've retired your business or you want to retire your business. How does that look for you? What do you have in place? So using these stats as a tool to open up the conversation might be of help. So what are the benefits of an individual pension plan for your clients or prospects? So every dollar that lands in the individual pension plan is immediately vested. So there's no waiting period. That dollar becomes a dollar asset of the business owner. And that's important. And it also has stronger creditor protection. So they're not having to wait. That dollar becomes a dollar of asset for the individual, for the business owner. And it also, we're funding the IPP out of corporate bank account dollars, and we're moving corporate money into the individual pension plan. That means that the IPP is not an asset on the balance sheet. So that's another good news story. So it immediately vests for the individual, but it's also now not considered an asset for the corporation. So it is funded by the corporation, and I'll talk a little bit more about the intergenerational transfer. So what happens is when we open an individual pension plan, the corporation is now going to be responsible for paying for the retirement of the individual. That means that the contributions that are made by the corporation are now a business expense. So very tax efficient for the corporation. That also means that we stop making RRSP contributions. We can't contribute into an IPP and into an RRSP in the same year. So if you're thinking about this for 2025 and we're working on a couple of cases, one of the important things to be mentioning to the client is that they shouldn't be making any RSP contributions after February the 28th. Otherwise, we won't be able to open the IPP in 2025. And talking about RRSP, I like to call the RRSP, when we're comparing the potential IPP versus an RRSP, I like to call the RRSP a relic. For the right client, the IPP is going to be able to build much more retirement wealth than if they were just staying and contributing to the RRSP. So much higher contributions. And sometimes I get asked why, why are their contributions higher in an IPP than an RRSP? And the reason for that is the contribution formula in the IPP is based upon their age and their T4 income. The closer they get to retirement, the greater the contribution room grows. And so really what the government is trying to do with creating the IPP is have our business owners self-fund their retirement and give the tax advantage to the corporation and the tax deferral to the individual. So from a contribution point of view, we're able to make much greater contributions in the IPP than if we just stayed in the RRSP. Now, good news story, you might have heard in the past that, I know someone that opened an IPP once way back in, 1999, and, they had all these problems. And I am really happy to say that it's not as clunky now as it has been in the past. So about 4 years ago, FSRA removed itself as being a governing body in the province of Ontario. And that has allowed our clients to be in the driver's seat. So now they have the option of making partial payments or taking a pension holiday, not making any pension contributions into the plan. And so it gets to be determined, the frequency by your client, the business owner, instead of FSRA, the governing body. So that was a really great news story. And since that happened about 4 years ago, we've seen an uptick in the market at about 30% year over year. We're seeing greater interest in the IPP because of the flexibility, but also accountants have lost a lot of levers to be able to bring tax efficiency to their corporations. And they are now open, and most of them are open and receptive to using the IPP and recommending it. So while we would have had a little pushback from the accountants, now we see them on side much more so than in the past. So funding opportunity, fantastic for the corporation, flexibility built in now for our clients, and they get to determine the frequency with which they make the payments. And of course, what they don't put in, they don't contribute, they don't get out at the end. So that's always, the discussion that my advisors are having. If you don't put it in, you can't take it out. So this is just a quick snapshot about one, we'll look at this in more detail, but just to illustrate the difference between the value of an IPP versus an RRSP. So we've got a client here, age 50 years old, income at 175,000, very, very conservative assumptions being used with a retirement age of 50. So at age 50 in the light blue section, we're contributing for a 15-year period, and that's $2.4 million being accumulated and contributed. Now, what if they change from the RSP to the IPP? They're now, because we're calculating the contribution amount based on that T4 income and their age, and we don't have that 18% restriction that the RSP has, we're now able to put in almost $500,000 more, and that's the dark blue line. So just based upon the same T4, same age, same contribution period, we've got almost $500,000 more going into the IPP. Now, one of the features of an IPP is past service, and that means we get to look to the years when the individual was getting T4 income, but they didn't have a pension plan in place. That's another $400,000. So with this particular case, we're looking at almost $1 million more retirement wealth being put into the IPP versus the RRSP. So who are you looking for? Who's the ideal client? T4 income of 100,000 and above, between the ages of 38 and 71 years, and they must be incorporated. So 3 really easy, simple things to remember: 38 to 71, must be incorporated, got to have T4 income, 100K and above. So that's your ideal client. What's the opportunity for you, the advisor? Well, obviously an increase in sales, a new opportunity to speak with a client. So, sometimes you're going back to your clients with the same, it's RSP season, let's look at, the opportunity, et cetera, or, you're considering more life insurance. So this is a different story. This is a different door opener. Now you've got something fresh and new to approach those business owners that are earning 100K and above. Client retention. This is sticky business. When an IPP goes into place, generally the lifespan is about 10 to 15 years. It stays on the books and it doesn't move. Only twice, I just got one in my inbox this morning. Twice in 6 years, I've had an advisor of record change. That's it. So the business doesn't move. The clients are very loyal to the product and therefore loyal to you, the advisor. So what are the benefits for you? Well, market instability. You might think, well, that doesn't intuitively make sense. Why would an IPP be a good news story when the markets are unstable? Many times you're having to handhold your clients because they get jittery with the ups and the downs within the marketplace. The individual pension plan has one of its requirements set by CRA means that it needs to have a 7.5% net rate of return. And because of that requirement, and it's one of a few requirements that we run actuarial calculations on, but because of that requirement, the conversation is really easy. When the markets are tumbling or there's a lot of uncertainty, you can call that client up and say, you don't need to worry because we have a mechanism in the IPP where we can recover your investment losses. So market instability can be a good news story for your IPP clients. Keep ahead of competitors. Well, that's just natural, right? This is a unique product that sits in a unique space within the market. So this is going to set you apart and distinguish you from other financial advisors. In fact, I'll share a story. My advisor, his name is Boda, and Boda is based in Calgary. I had a phone call from Boda about 3 years ago, and I didn't know him at all. He's a stranger to myself, and the phone call went something like this. So I was referred by my MGA. I understand that IA Financial has an individual pension plan, and I'm curious to learn more about it, and can you support me? And I said, certainly. So tell me about the opportunity that you're looking at. He said, well, it's really interesting because a doctor couple, so husband and wife, each with their own separate practices, decided to go out and find a new financial advisor. And what they did was based upon recommendation, they shortlisted 3 advisors, but those advisors had no existing relationship with this couple. And each advisor was asked to present a financial plan. So Boda put the individual pension plan within his financial plan for the couple, and he ended up winning the business. And so I asked him when he came back and said, okay, now it's time for me, to chat a little bit more about the IPP. I said, well, what is it that you think that made them choose you apart from the other advisors? And he said, well, I didn't know what it was, so I asked them, and they said it was because I was the only advisor that put an IPP into their financial plan. So it has the ability to distinguish you in the marketplace against your competitors, but it's also a huge win for you in bringing more value to your client. Increase your sales and your assets under management. We're going to be transferring RRSP assets from other sources, so from other financial institutions or banks. And so again, that's how your assets under management continue to grow. And back in, 2024, so this year, we had capital gains taxation changes. In 2017, we lost income sprinkling, passive income rules came about. And so it became a more difficult story to be able to find tax relief for our incorporated clients. And so because each one of these levers has now sort of shrunk your opportunity, the IPP stands in higher stature. So now we know what are the benefits for the client and the benefits for you as an advisor. My question to you is, who comes to mind? Now you know what the ideal client is or looks like. Who's coming bubbling up to your mind? Oh, I could go and talk to this business owner, or I remember it's about 3 years since I've talked to Joe and I really had nothing new to tell Joe, or Jane. And so this might be an opportunity for you to build more business. Okay, so now we're going to get into some of the heavy lifting around some of the compliance requirements for the CE credit. But these are the 4 most asked questions by the prospect. So this is an education for you, and don't worry, you don't need to memorize this. My role is to support you. What I ask you to do is go out and find that ideal client, gather some data, have the initial conversation with them, gather some data from them. I'll create the illustration together. We'll review it for value and then make an appointment with the client. I'll do all the heavy lifting. You've got the relationship, I've got the knowledge. I'll do all the heavy lifting and then we'll close the sale. So let's get down to some of the nuts and bolts. Oh, before we go there, apologies. put this in the wrong spot. It should have been in a bit different spot. So we said that the standard IPP is good for 38 years old to 71. And what we found was that family-run businesses who had adult children who were working in a real T4 job, that CRA would look at that job and say, yes, this qualifies, didn't have a relationship with a financial advisor. You've got the relationship generally with the business owners, you know, the mother and father, but not necessarily with the next generation, the children. So we identified a gap, but we also want those younger candidates, say 30 to 38 years old, to be aware of an individual pension plan. And so we've created this little mini hybrid IPP. And the requirements for this are much less than our standard IPP. Our standard IPP, we're looking at 100K of T4 income. This one only around 50K. And we're going to make it as a defined contribution formula. We are going to transfer the IPP, the mini or hybrid IPP, into a standard IPP when they come to about 38 years old. So it provides great opportunity for you to build a relationship with that second generation if you're working with a family-run business. So there's two levers that we're taking advantage of with the individual pension plan, and one is, first and foremost, it's a retirement savings vehicle. This was started in 1990, the IPP. The government created the IPP because it recognized that its business owners, incorporated business owners, were at a disadvantage. They weren't getting the same benefit that individuals could get in an RRSP. So they created the individual pension plan, individual, right, for one, or we can put a family into it, for one individual, and what we're defining is how much money they're getting out at the end. It was created by CRA as first and foremost a retirement savings tool. So that's what the lens is that I look at. All of the questions and all of the requirements is going to be, how are we satisfying the needs of CRA as they have set the regulations up? So it's a retirement savings tool, but in addition to that, the side benefit is that it's a great tax planning tool for the corp as well as for the individual, the business owner. How do we finance the IPP? Well, you can take money out of retained earnings. You might have money in the holdco that you've kind of socked away. You transfer that money out of the holdco into the operating company, and the operating company is going to be the company that's out issuing the T4s, and so that's where the IPP will be set up. It'll be set up in the operating company. So we don't care how the money comes into IA and gets contributed into the IPP, right? That's for you and the accountant to work out all those little moving parts. What we do want is we want to be coming out of the company that T4 is being generated from. And we're looking at current service. So current service is what is happening in 2024 for contribution, 2025 for contribution, 2026 for contribution. That's called current service. So every year, starting now and going forward, is what we're currently going to pay on an annual basis. And that amount is going to increase over time, all the way up to retirement age. Current service. Past service. Past service is another special feature of the IPP. We can look to all of the years in the past when your client was getting T4 income, but didn't have an IPP in place. So that could be 10, 15, 20 years in the past. And all of those years, your client gets to fund using corporate dollars. So that past service is going to accumulate into can be a very large amount of money. So now we're funding current service, 24, 25, 26, and past service going back from 2024 all the way back in history. And both of those amounts go into the IPP fund. Both of those amounts are paid from corporate bank account, now becoming a very lucrative business deduction. So that current service, 24, 25, 26, and the years that follow, we will not be making an RRSP contribution. So the RSP contribution is going to stop, so they're no longer making that on a personal basis. Instead, that current service is going to be paid for by the corporation. Plus past service, so those two together are going to create a very large opportunity to build that retirement wealth and also be very tax efficient. I like to think of an IPP as a pie, and that pie is split into two halves. On the one side is the defined benefit, the DB, locked-in component. And the locked-in component means that they cannot access those dollars until they wind up the plan or they trigger retirement. So the defined benefit dollars are locked in the IPP. The second half of the pie is the additional voluntary account. And that's where we're going to transfer excess RRSP assets into the plan, and your client will have an opportunity to access them at any point in time. So they are fully accessible to your client on the additional voluntary component. And so the IPP has two pieces: the defined benefit part, which is where all of the corporate contributions go, and the required amount of RSPs gets transferred into. The excess is, let me just give you a little bit of an example. Let's say your client has $400,000 in RRSPs, and they're required to transfer over $300,000. So that $300,000 will sit on the DB, defined benefit, locked-in part. And the extra $100,000, are we going to leave that at the bank? No, we're not going to leave that at the bank. We're going to say to the client, you know what? I want to be your retirement advisor for every aspect of your retirement. So we're going to transfer that $100,000 that is going to now be deposited into the additional voluntary account. It's going to be sitting over here on the flexible side. You will have access to it. It's not locked in. And one of the reasons for transferring that $100,000 over is that all of the management expense ratios are deductible on both the defined benefit part and that excess $100,000. So if you left that $100,000 in their RSP at the bank, they're losing the opportunity to have their management expense ratios paid for by the corporation. So this feature is a very, very valuable lever that you want to be highlighting when you're talking with your prospects. And again, it will be something that I will cover in the sales presentation. So the mechanics, who does what? So good news is we have been offering IPPs in the marketplace for over 30 years. I know you're thinking, how am I just hearing about this if you've been doing this for 30 years? Well, it's the best kept secret, which I'm really trying to change. And for 30 years, that means that we've got very sound business process and business practice, and we know what works. And from a sales perspective and having conversations, I know what all the hot buttons are and how to tease information out of your prospect. So the mechanics, who does what? So the plan administrator is the employer. So that is company ABC. They're the plan administrator. Who's the member? The member is going to be the business owner or a connected shareholder. And those are the only two things that the client is responsible for: registering for the plan, designating a beneficiary. With yourself, they're going to create a portfolio of investments on our segregated fund platform, and you would review that on an annual or semi-annual basis, depending on how you meet with your clients. The rest of the work is done by IA Professional Services. So we're the trustee, we're the actuary, we have our in-house actuaries. We don't need a third party external. We've got 4 actuaries on in-house, and we've got 5 service member team members available to provide all the back office support service. So in essence, once the biggest hurdle really is the client finding all of their T4 slips going back to, 10 or 15 years. Sometimes they're not readily available. Otherwise, we've got a sound business process. We copy you, the advisor, every time that we're in touch with your client, so that you are, we're fully transparent, so that you know what is needed from your client. What we ask you to do is keep your finger on the pulse of our requests, as we know that, your clients are really busy running the business, and especially the first time around, they're not going to be familiar with the process. So we will let your clients know what they need to do and when they need to do it. And we ask you to just monitor the request. If you didn't see the T4 come through from your client, but we'd asked for it a couple of months ago, that will be your responsibility to follow up with the client. Hey, did you send that over to IA? They need to work on your file. We'll also be sending a contribution notice that will tell your client how much they can contribute for the coming year. So those are primarily the two areas that we reach out to your client asking for information. We would like you to be the quarterback there, sort of just making sure that the requests do get fulfilled. Now, another secret weapon. So this is when I had mentioned family-run businesses, and this is the intergenerational wealth transfer. And we had talked about, how do we open up a relationship with the next generation, and let me share with you how the intergenerational transfer works. So we've got mom and dad and a son and a daughter. All of them are working in the family-run business, all of them with real income, real T4 income. So we've got the son and the daughter at 50,000 of T4 income, where mom and dad are at 400,000. So when we start out, we open 4 IPPs, one for each individual. About 2 years to retirement for mom and dad, what we will do is we will collapse the 4 IPPs and create a family pooled IPP, bringing all those assets together that totals about $900,000. So now mom and dad go into retirement. So the very first box on the top left-hand side, we've got the family IPP, 900K, 4 family members. Mom and dad decide to retire. So we pay mom and dad until death. Okay, so mom gets paid out, dad gets paid out, they both pass away. Let's suppose that we paid them $200,000 of the 900. Now we have $700,000 left in that IPP. Bottom left box, the family IPP has 700K, only 2 family members in it. Now we're going to split that family IPP, and we're going to open an IPP for the daughter and transfer assets from the 700,000, and the same thing for the son. So we've taken $900,000, paid mom and dad 200K. Now the balance of the 700K gets split between the son and the daughter. And it's not I like, Jane better than John. It is an actuarial calculation that our team will determine how much of that 700,000 each one is going to be allocated. So it's not a preference, it's not a beneficiary designation, it is a mathematical calculation. So you can see how moving money from one generation to the next is hugely tax efficient, because that 700,000 that was left over transfers to the next generation, and they're only taxed on it when the son and the daughter retire themselves. So it's flowed through the corporation, it's flowed through the generations, and it's not taxed until they withdraw it as retirement income. So if you've got family-run businesses, this intergenerational transfer is a huge opportunity for tax deferral and tax efficiency. As I'd mentioned, YIA, so you've got myself as your dedicated sales specialist. I'm here to help you prospect. I've got marketing material, I've got an advisor kit. You open up the opportunity and speak, to the ideal prospect. We don't want you wasting your time, so really do kind of try to keep it in the parameters of what I laid out. However, you're going to end up with the occasional situation where you might have a 34-year-old who's, an IT guru and might be earning $130,000. You think, well, they're not 38, so should I talk to them about it? On those kind of odd situations, we always, I would prefer that you approach me with the opportunity, and then let's kick the tires and see what happens, and see whether or not there's enough value. So that's pretty much the parameters around the ideal client. But if you've got some outliers, I'd like to hear about them as well. So we offer sales support through myself. I'm also responsible for Atlantic Canada. Let's say the only province that I don't support is Quebec. So I'm very busy. Fortunately, with COVID, it really helped sort of narrow and streamline my travel time. So I do a lot of my work nationally, through video. We have our own seasoned, dedicated actuarial services team. And this is really important to know. Our team does nothing but individual pension plan and retirement compensation arrangement, just those two products. So we specialize in these two products only. We're not pulled into other products or other offerings. Our administration team, again, they're also in-house and they are national. And we have the same investment lineup that you would find on our group pension platform. So a lot of consistency. What we're trying to do is keep it easy and simple, one point of contact, everything in-house, myself at the front end and my team at the back end for you. So we've got a couple of examples to look at. So this is I'm going to just refresh this one as well. So the sorry, my apology. Sometimes I get asked, why is it age 38 that you say you would start an IPP? And we say age 38 because up until that period of time, and that's for our standard IPP, age 38, up until that period of time, they can contribute into an RSP almost at the same rate that they would contribute into an IPP. For the intergenerational family that's got a family-run business, we'll put in that hybrid IPP for them. But generally, you're going to get the story from me. You're going to get the analysis based upon what's the best interest of the client. And sometimes we need the client to earn more income, or sometimes we need them to become a little bit older. So if I feel that it's appropriate that we defer putting the IPP in place and just have them continue to build retirement dollars in their RSP, you'll get that, bottom line story from me very, very straight. So again, this is a super comparison. Light blue RSP, that's your low-hanging fruit. If you've got business owners that are incorporated, that are already contributing to an RSP, this is your natural, easy opportunity to close an IPP really easy and really quickly. If you have an individual who is getting T4 income but hasn't contributed very much to an RSP, they are a great candidate as well. So no worries there. So here we have the light blue section RSP, carry on, carry on, carry on. Let's open the IPP instead, and what we see is we've got another $500,000 in the first box, $493,000. That is going to be contributed by the corporation, increasing the retirement wealth, increasing the tax efficiency. And then if they have past years of service, that's the gray section. It's another $400,000. So not putting this in front of your clients or not putting this in front of your prospects is really doing them a disservice. You don't have to be the expert. Have the conversation. So one of the opening lines I coach my advisors on is, so if I could show you a way that you would send less tax to Ottawa and have more wealth in retirement than in your RSP, would you be interested in finding out how that looks for you? Right? So it's a very easy, open-ended question. Less tax going to Ottawa, more for you at the end. Let's find out, what the value is for you. Just a little bottom box on the left-hand side. So the RSP limit for 2024 was $31,560. What we're going to see here is how much more an IPP will have more contribution room than the RSP. So here's Peter. Peter owns a corporation. He's 58. He plans on retiring at age 65. So he's got not a whole lot of runway, but it's not too late for him to open an IPP. His two sons and his wife work in the company, so it's an intergenerational family-run business. And the salaries between the four of them run anywhere between $90K and $450K over the previous 9 years. So they wanted to open an IPP in 2023 and have those 9 years of past service. Remember that magic bullet that we had where we can look to the past when they were getting T4 income, but they didn't have a pension plan in place. So Peter is going to look at what's the value, and we've got here, and I'm going to keep it really, really simple. So let's look at the bottom total lines. The IPP contribution from 2023 to 2030 was $415,000. The next box over, we had those 9 years of past service that the corporation can pay for, another $112,000. So from the IPP, just over $1 million going into the IPP funded by the corporation. That means that $1 million is now a business deduction, so creating greater tax efficiency for your client. What if I just stay in the old relic, the RRSP? What does that look like? Well, we've got $260,000 at the end of 2030 with RSP contributions, and with the total of the RSP fund at $652,000. The difference, same person, same age, same T4, the difference being over $360,000 more in retirement savings. So a really great opportunity, right? Tax lever, retirement lever. This is one of my favorite clients. This is Ozal. She's 50 years old, and she was looking at retiring when she was 65. We modeled for her, what do your contributions look like if you stay in the RRSP from now over the next 5 years? So we have an increase in that, just in that 5-year period. And remember, she's 50 and she wants to retire at 65. So she's got 15 years. So we're going to multiply that by 3. So the IPP increase over the RSP was $64,000. She had past service. She had a lot of past service, which was $171,000 that her corporation could put in. And let me just add a little bit of insight into the past service. That can be a very, very large number. And the benefit is that can be paid for over a period of time. So your client may choose to pay for that over 4 years. And that's perfectly fine. We'll work with your client to create that payment plan over a 4-year period. Don't think that they have to come up with that $171,000 right away, although their accountant may want that tax deduction and take it, in that year. The third box, what's crystallization? So back on March the 30th of 2020, we had the lowest market day. It crashed by 23%. In one of the rules in the IPP is that we must have a net rate of return of 7.5%. So we, every 4 years, run a valuation. We will determine, so we're looking at that number, we're looking at the cost of living, we're looking at the inflation rate, plus a couple of other little actuarial calculations. And we're looking to see how's the funding level of the IPP. Is it on target? Is it in surplus? Or is it in a deficit? If it's in a deficit, then that becomes a bonus year. So we crystallized that deficit for her, which amounted to $17,000, meaning we could take $17,000 out of the corporate bank account, put it into the IPP. Now we've got the investment losses replaced. So the RSP value was 525,000, the IPP value 900,000. And what would it cost over that 5-year period? $16,500, right? So huge return on their investment. Now, last question that many of our clients want answered. How do I get, now I know I can take retained earnings. Now I know how I can move money around. I understand the tax benefits for the corporation. I know that I don't make my RSP contributions anymore, but I get to put a whole lot more money, and end up with more money at the end of the day. How do I get money out? There's 3 options that are available. If the corporation is staying open and active, then we can send them their IPP retirement payment when the corporation is making annual filings with CRA. So the accountant is sending in those documents. Second option, let's say they want to sell their business. So they sell their business, now they can take the money in the IPP and buy an insured annuity, or they can transfer the money in the IPP into their RIF or their LIRA. It doesn't come over at 100% because it is a pension plan. So it comes over at about 80, 90% in that neighborhood. They will receive that 10 to 20% as income, taxable income to them at their current tax rate in that year. So getting money out, there's 3 different ways, 3 different levels of, it depends on what your client wants in retirement. Do they want to set it and forget it? Do they just want that guaranteed paycheck coming in because they spent 30 years building their business and had, way too much uncertainty, so buy an annuity? Or they want more flexibility, they can put it into their RSP or their RIF and know that a little portion of that amount is going to be taxable income for them. We have an extensive fund lineup on our segregated fund platform, over 110 different funds, socially responsible, alternatives, and of course, all of the asset classes. And again, don't forget that the management expense ratios are deductible as a business expense. So we will invoice your client. So let's say the MERs were $1,000 for Q1. We'll send company ABC invoice for $1,000. It's paid by the corporation. That $1,000 goes into the IPP, and now their investments are whole again. So they're going to pay the MERs on the investments, but that's deductible as a business expense. I mean, that's just beautiful. You can't do that in an RSP. We have no setup fee, and all of these fees are deductible as a business expense. So in Ontario, for one IPP with one member, the cost is $1,100 per year, which is about $20, $21 a month. If we have any special work that we have to do outside of our normal standard business practice, then we have an hourly rate, which is industry standard. The wind-up fees are actually about $1,500 in Ontario. So no need to worry about it being $3,000. It's only about $1,500. And of course, the investment management fees that we had talked about. When we have an illustration created, these are some screenshots about what that illustration looks like. Very simple executive summary showing what those 4 key components are. How much is my corporation going to contribute? How much money do I get out? What does it cost me? And what's the potential tax savings? So depending upon their tax rate, if they follow the recommended contribution schedule, then we map out what the potential tax savings is for them as well. A little more information in getting down into some of the detail within the IPP. And here's a little summary comparing, if you stay in the RSP, how much money will you have? And if you don't open an IPP, how much money are you losing? So 95% closing ratio when we work together. So you're looking for your prospects that are incorporated, T4 income of 100K and above, 38 to age 71. We have a simulator online as well. Very easy, simple tool just to whet their appetite. You collect the data. We've got a form, just a 1-page form, very simple, for me to create the illustration with. We'll review it, and then we'll make the presentation to the client. Closing, again, closing success rate. I know the hot buttons. I know the conversation points. I work with accountants all the time. And again, it's becoming easier to stick handle them because they are running out of levers to use, and they do find it, the IPP, to be very favorable. So what are we looking at from a timeline perspective? So you present the concept to the prospect, gather the information, present the solution, secure the client approval, because it's all based on data. It's not subjective. They complete the application. Again, that's where we end up with a little bit of a delay sometimes, is they need to provide T4s going back to, perhaps 1990 or 2000s. They may not be at their fingertips. We also require the most recent notice of assessment. And then once the file is complete, it gets submitted to our actuarial team. They take 2 to 3 weeks to create the first valuation and submit it to CRA. CRA assigns a file number, and then we'll advise the client when the contributions can be made. So it's pretty easy and straightforward. My role for you today was I want you to walk away with, this is very efficient. This is a great tax lever. It has supersized RRSP, so super opportunity for building retirement wealth for my clients. That I'm your secret weapon sitting in your back pocket, so I'm going to do most of the heavy lifting. What we need you to do is find the right prospects so that we can build you more sales. And that's my presentation. So I'm going to go back here and stop sharing and see if we have any questions.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Christine. I do have one question here. So what's the downside of IPP? Are there any costs associated to this?
Yeah, so they're going to pay their MERs on their investments, and the annual actuarial and administration cost in Ontario is $1,100. And the MERs are deductible for the business, as is that $1,100 annual fee.
Perfect. And let me just see. I don't think there are any more questions here. I remind everyone, if you do have any questions, feel free to type them in the question box, or you can also raise your hand and I can unmute your mic.
For those breaks,
yeah, we have a question here. MERs are not tax deductible.
Yes, they are tax deductible when they are in an IPP.
Perfect. Thanks. Perfect. Okay, I think that that's all the questions we have here. So I just want to say thank you so much, Christine, for your time. Great presentation, and thank you for everyone who attended today. Should you have any further questions, feel free to reach out to Christine or myself, and we'd be more than happy to support you. But with that being said, I hope everyone has a wonderful day.
Thanks very much, everybody. Bye-bye.